big armies boss the battlefield. Massed forces, massive firepower carry the day. But there is a band of brothers who stand apart.
Being a ranger is a state of mind. It's a state of being.
They fight longer, harder, and smarter than anyone else.
Put them in when you wanted everything brought to the ground.
They are the U.S. Army Rangers. Get ready as we travel back through generations of technology to find out how the Rangers became the elite infantry unit of the finest fighting force in the world. It's time to go ballistic. U.S. Army Rangers are masters of survival. Built to cope with life deep behind enemy lines, they are the lords of ambush and assault. Got an enemy position that needs eliminating or an insurgent that needs seizing? Send for the Rangers. From the beaches of D-Day to the jungles of Vietnam and street fighting in Somalia, U.S. Army Rangers have taken the fight to the enemy in every corner of the globe. Today's Army Ranger is equipped for life in the lair of the enemy. The compact and accurate M4 carbine, lethal up close, deadly at range. The devastating M249 machine gun, rapid fire to keep heads down. The hard-hitting Javelin anti-tank missile, punching well above its weight. All this makes the Ranger a match for the most formidable foe. Now, Weaponology will go back through Ranger history to find out how 18th century ambush tactics, high-tech weaponry, and awesome physical training have come together to make the U.S. Army Rangers the toughest light infantry unit in the world. The original Rangers in colonial North America created the template. Unconventional companies, they fought unconventional wars with unconventional tactics. They thrived in places where the usual rules of engagement do not apply.
Rangers do two things through history. They patrol and they raid. And so the idea of ranging or being a borderer means protecting the boundaries of your nation or your tribe.
The most famous of their number was an 18th century commando considered the granddaddy of counterinsurgency, Major Robert Rogers. Rogers raised his first band of Rangers in 1756. The mission? To protect British settlers from raiding Native Americans and their French allies.
In America, on the frontier, the standing army style of linear warfare did not work in the woods because the Indians didn't play by the same rules. They would fight using ambush.
The settlers had to adapt to survive. They needed to meet the raiders on their own terms. Rogers' men soon became the masters of patrol and ambush.
The idea was to take frontiersmen who were able to live in the wilderness and to fight like the Indians. They became raiders. They began to perform long-range penetration raids.
Rogers' Rangers adopted the same tactics and wielded them with great success. Their victories helped turn the tide in the struggle for control of North America. Camouflage, stealth, and the brutal tomahawk had become their stocks in trade.
The tactics they developed were taken largely from the Indians, the skulking way of war, ambush techniques, fighting in from very close, using the musket at 50 yards or less, and then moving in to finish up with the tomahawk and the long knife.
The tomahawk was the frontiersman's friend, a tool for cutting wood and making shelter. Rogers Rangers learned from the Indians how to use it as a savage close-quarters weapon.
Not only as a hand weapon for hand-to-hand combat in close quarters, but also a skilled frontiersman or Indian could throw it into an enemy to knock them out to about 25 yards in some cases.
The development of rapid-firing weapons in the 19th and 20th centuries seems to spell the end for the tomahawk. But 200 years later, the 17th century tomahawk was updated and retooled for the modern battlefield. Bobby Branton is a combat knife and tomahawk designer. He has been involved in the manufacture of the tomahawk that was reborn in the jungles of Vietnam.
Back in the late 60s and early 70s, the gentleman that I got to be friends with, his name was Peter Lagana. He invented the Vietnam tomahawk.
Rangers in Vietnam were attracted to the tomahawk for the same reason as Rogers Rangers. A weapon that can perform many tasks means less kit. Less kit means you can move faster. Moving fast means staying alive.
He wanted a good tool, something that would be a little bit more versatile than just a regular knife. Something that you can use for trenching, you can use it for breaching, and you can use it for hand-to-hand combat.
The 2006 model tomahawk is popular with troops in Iraq and Afghanistan looking to boost their equipment. Tomahawks have come a long way. Composite materials now make them almost indestructible.
This would have been a wooden tomahawk. It would have more than likely would have broken in half.
Bobby was emailed the story by a soldier in Iraq who owes his life to his tomahawk.
They were going into a small little hut. When they knocked on the door, nobody would answer. So the soldier kicks the door down. The bad guy is right there in his face, and he just simply pulled his tomahawk off of his vest and reached up and hit him, just split him right in the head.
But the tomahawk makes rare combat appearances today. The evolution of rapid-fire weapons keeps the enemy at arm's length. Many units used the term Ranger in the centuries after Robert Rogers. But it wasn't until Captain William O. Darby in 1942 that it became part of the military mainstream once again. Darby was the father of a new breed of Ranger.
The Rangers are very similar to the British Commandos. Their primary responsibility is operating behind enemy lines. Of the war in Europe, at least half of the time I was behind the German lines.
Darby was commissioned by the U.S. Army to create an elite raiding unit on the lines of the British Commandos. But Darby's Rangers used 18th century American raiding tactics as the U.S. Army drove through occupied Europe.
We became part of Patton's Third Army. He looked at it as his eyes and ears. When you're behind the German lines, the best thing to do is hide during the day and maneuver at night. We would take patrols of 10 to 12, up to 100, and explore what was in front of Patton's army.
The Rangers were formally disbanded in 1945. In the Korean conflict, 3 companies of Rangers were raised to raid deep behind communist lines. But skip forward a decade to the jungles of Vietnam, and the bushcraft and hit-and-run tactics of Rogers Rangers would be needed once again.
And those same tactics that Rogers and other Rangers developed are very applicable to some of the areas we've served in since. In Vietnam, with the thick brush that we had there.
American forces fighting the communist menace were dragged into an unconventional conflict against guerrillas in South Vietnam and Cambodia. It was a situation that cried out for ranging patrols.
The idea of being able to fight as rangers came back during the Vietnam War because of the jungles, the swamps, and the guerrilla tactics of the enemy.
American forces in Vietnam tried to fill the gap with long-range reconnaissance patrols, or LRPs, and Echo recon companies. Many of these ranging companies' leaders had been to Ranger School. They had Ranger DNA.
When I went on a mission, I would take my platoon to find, locate, and take care of the enemy. Establishing patrol bases and looking for signs of the enemy, setting up ambushes. All these techniques for doing this type of reconnaissance were all based on things that I learned in Ranger School.
By 1969, the need for Ranger units was officially recognized, and these units became part of the Ranger family tree. The legendary 75th Ranger Regiment was born out of LRP and Echo.
Each one of these companies was assigned to a division or a separate brigade in Vietnam. And they built up into full-sized units and served as Rangers. And ever since February 1st, 1969, then, the United States has maintained their Ranger companies in wartime and in peace.
Rewind 2 centuries. Major Robert Rogers had learned to think and act like his enemy. He adopted the weapons, tactics, and techniques of the Native Americans.
The patrolling that we did was not unlike those ancient Rangers because you had to understand the enemy. You had to understand how the enemy thought. You must learn his tactics, techniques, and procedures. That's the only way to defeat him.
We didn't wear helmets or flak jackets, anything like that, and I had a Soviet AK, which was my preferred, but anything we could do to confuse the North Vietnamese helped.
Rogers' Rangers were frontiersmen and hunters with an innate ability to read nature. Graduates of Ranger School were taught the same skills they honed in the jungle.
By looking at the layout of the land and using the experience that you had, you could predict where the trails would be, where the bunkers would be, where the avenues of approach would be, the good places to set up ambushes.
The birds, when the birds were chirping, we were happy. When there's all of a sudden a lush silence, that was bad.
Ambush tactics of Robert Rogers were beefed up with some new technology. Booby trap mines were added to the family of weapons. Claymore plus ambush equals devastation.
Virtually every day we used claymores, and those were the greatest killing devices that we had. And those were what would initiate the ambush, after which a heavy volume of fire would then be fired into the kill zone.
The M18 Claymore was invented by Norman McLeod and adopted in 1960. A pound and a half of plastic explosives sent 700 ball bearings in a 100-yard arc. The man-height wall of balls lays down everything in its path.
Automatic ambushes, I think they were terrified of them because you put daisy chain claymore mines together and you can clean off a trail pretty readily with that.
Once we chose our ambush location, it was designed to be the final time that these guys ever walked anywhere.
Claymore mines are just one part of the Rangers' ambush arsenal. The genius of U.S. Army Rangers is combining rules of engagement that haven't changed in 300 years with some seriously explosive technology. No No assignment is too tough for the Rangers. No enemy fortification is safe. Trained and raised to punch holes in the enemy defense, the U.S. Ranger is the man for the job that no one else wants.
How high, how far, that's what it's all about. You let me know what you want, and I'm there.
And there had never been a job tougher than the D-Day invasion of Europe. The D-Day invasion needed some specialist gear. Ranger units were kitted out to kick down the Nazis' front door.
The U.S. Army formed Ranger battalions in the Second World War in preparation for the invasion of Normandy in 1944. The British had previously created commando units, which in their original outline were simply raiding units.
D-Day was to be the Rangers' defining moment, the moment the legend was born.
The American Rangers had a more specific purpose, which was to lead conventional troops in their assaults on the beaches of Normandy.
2 specially equipped Ranger companies were given their missions. 5th Rangers were to lead the charge on Omaha, the most deadly of all the landing sites. 2nd Rangers were to take the cliffs commanding Omaha and Utah.
Scaling walls, scaling ropes, and so on and so forth was very much a part of the training, unlike the regular infantry. The Ranger battalions were well trained by the British commandos in climbing cliffs.
The morning of June 6, 1944. Roger Neighborgull was in a landing craft heading straight for the cliffs. His mission was simple: storm the beach, climb the cliffs, destroy the guns overlooking the shore.
The way the Rangers got up the Pointe du Hoc was a variety of ways. The London Fire Department gave a suggestion that the way to do it was put up fire department ladders on boats and run the boat right up to the cliff.
But these ladders led to tragedy. Not one made it. They had better luck with grappling hooks. Specially designed mortars bolted to the landing craft fired iron hooks 100 feet onto the cliff tops. Then, Rangers pulled themselves up the sheer face of the Pointe du Hoc, all in the face of desperate German defense.
Not only did they have to make an amphibious assault, a landing on the beach or the shore, but they also had to go straight up the cliffs then, hand over hand, with enough equipment to fight to get to the top. All the while the Germans are firing machine guns and throwing down hand grenades.
The Germans either cut the lines or just threw them back. My company got up mostly by going up through crevices. 75 to 80 people got up the cliff.
The Rangers who survived the hail of German lead found the guns had been moved. They fanned out, discovered them a short distance away. Mission accomplished. The grappling hooks of D-Day have founded a dynasty of military grappling technology. The latest of these is the tail gun.
TAIL stands for Tactically Air-Initiated Launch, or TAIL system.
Jim Labine of the Battelle Corporation developed TAIL for U.S. elite units.
Any service could use it. You can go building top to building top, you can go over swollen rivers.
Grappling guns on D-Day were fired from mortars using high explosives. This made them big, noisy, and dangerous. Today's tail gun is smaller, safer, and quiet enough for tactical assault.
The tail system is pneumatically operated. It basically takes compressed air from a diver's tank and charges the system. The air is regulated going into the gun so that the shot height is adjustable.
TAIL was designed with the soldier in mind. Its features are shared with the Ranger's M16 rifle and M4 carbine.
When we designed the system, we made it so it would be user-friendly. They call it muscle memory, and what we did was we used features like the shoulder butt, the handrail, and the forward grip. And these are systems that are used on their current weapon systems, so when they actually feel it in their shoulder, it feels similar to what they fire on a day-to-day basis.
Far outstripping the ones that failed the Rangers at Pointe du Hoc, a new generation of ladders has been developed.
And allows them to scale building or structures that they need to scale without having to throw the ladder.
Back on the beaches of D-Day, the 5th Rangers were leading the charge on the beach below the cliffs. The Rangers needed to get off the sand as fast as possible. Great mounds of barbed wire, raked by machine gun fire, stood in the way. There are ways to cross deadly walls of wire. A special weapon dating back to the British Empire served them well. Rewind back to the Bangalore torpedo, invented in Bangalore, India in 1912. It was the pipe dream of Captain McClintock of the Bengal, Bombay, and Madras Sappers and Miners Regiment. Little more than a series of 5-foot tubes packed with up to 85 pounds of high explosives. It eats barbed wire for breakfast.
Basically a fixed line charge. The idea is to be able to take sections of pipe, which are filled with explosive, and set these sections together, affix them, and be able to push it underneath an obstacle, usually barbed wire, and to be able to use an explosive detonator to set it off.
The Bangalore blasted the barbed wire off that deadly beachhead, propelling the 5th Ranger Battalion into the fight for Nazi-held Europe. Bangalore torpedoes are still in use today. But now, a new generation of line charges perform many of the Bangalore's deadly jobs. A series of fragmentation grenades attached to a line are fired by rocket over barbed wire or minefield. When the grenades explode, they detonate any mines and can clear a path up to 148 feet.
There's something called APOBs now, which is a backpack line charge. 2 Rangers can carry this and still clear a lane in a minefield so that the mission or raid can continue.
And when Ranger missions go on the offensive, deep in enemy territory, it's time to take out the guns. It's time to get deadly.
We relied on that great rifle in combat when the Chinese mounted their first assault on our position.
Rangers are the shock troops of the U.S. military. Got an airfield that needs seizing? Need an enemy position wiped from the face of the earth? Send for the Rangers.
Everyone standing who is not wearing the same uniform you are has to be dead.
The modern Ranger has the pick of the best military tech. He can keep heads down with the belt-fed M249. He can pick off targets with a semi-automatic sniper rifle. Or smash a big hole with the Javelin anti-tank missile. Skip back to the early American frontier. Rogers Rangers had to tailor their tactics to the weapons at hand.
Rogers Rangers used a musket very similar to this, a replica of the Brown Bess. It's a 75 caliber musket, good out to about 100 yards.
The Brown Bess was a smoothbore musket. The absence of rifling to put spin on the bullet meant that it was not an accurate weapon.
The big problem with this is it has a maximum range of
50 meters. So as you fire this thing, the bullet literally bounces down the barrel, and the last bounce it takes is the direction it's going to go.
200 years later, and accuracy is no problem. U.S. Army Rangers get the pick of pinpoint rapid-fire weapons for their missions.
Rangers had a characteristic, a trait, if you'd like, that you had an individual had a right to choose the weapon he wanted to go into combat with.
The M1 Garand and M1 Carbine were Ranger favorites in two major conflicts. They have to carry everything needed for survival far from home. That includes ammunition. Rangers like accurate weapons with a high rate of fire.
Rangers are light infantry. They favor light weapons such as the M1 carbine.
The carbine was only 35 inches long and weighed a mere 5 pounds. The combination of accuracy, compact size, and high rate of fire seemed to make it the ultimate Ranger weapon. But the pistol caliber lacks stopping power.
If you were to shoot me with this and I find out about it, I'm going to be very angry. The bullet is a pistol cartridge.
The M1 carbine was actually designed to replace the pistol, offering the shooter greater accuracy.
A carbine, if you look at it replacing the pistol, it's a very good weapon. In other words, it'll shoot up to 100 yards.
Let's see if we can take out some of these red balloons. Not bad. Let's see if we can repeat that test and use a .45 automatic pistol. Much tougher with a handgun.
As this demonstration shows, the M1 carbine was much easier to shoot than the same caliber handgun. Not only did the M1 make the Ranger more deadly, he got to carry less ammo. The M1 carbine's bigger brother was the M1 Garand. It was the standard infantry weapon in World War II and Korea. 5.5 million were produced in 4 decades of service. Its combination of accuracy, semi-automatic fire, and rifle caliber made it the #1 Ranger weapon.
Most people chose the M1 Garand. Some officers chose carbines, but most of them carried the M1 because it was a much more powerful weapon.
The adoption of John Garand's semi-automatic rifle in 1936 put the U.S. Army at an advantage over every other country in World War II.
The United States Army is the only army in World War II that gives everybody a semi-automatic weapon. So every time you pull the trigger, it fires a round.
I probably cleared that magazine in about 10 to 12 seconds. The more firepower that you can put out to suppress the enemy's firepower will lead you to victory on the battlefield.
The accuracy of the M1 Garand proved itself on the Korean battlefields. In the winter of 1950, Ralph Puckett's Rangers stumbled on a force of 300,000 Chinese.
We relied on that great rifle in combat. We were certainly relying on it on the night of November the 25th and 26th, when the Chinese mounted their first assault on our position.
The aimed rapid fire of the Garand kept the Chinese at bay all night. A badly wounded Ralph Puckett was able to escape with his life.
My riflemen in our frontline foxholes were firing single shots at those Chinese as they assaulted up the hill. And I called in an artillery concentration and also called in flares, which illuminated the battlefield and allowed my Rangers to pick out individual Chinese rather than just firing blindly into the darkness.
General Patton described the M1 as the finest battle implement ever created. The only weakness was a single design quirk that let an important secret out of the bag.
When you had fired all 8 rounds, the clip was automatically ejected with a loud twang. Sometimes people felt that the enemy could hear that.
So it's sort of like saying, I'm out of ammunition.
If they could count under the pressure of combat, they would fire 7 rounds and then silently remove that spent round and put another clip in.
Take an empty clip, throw it down on the ground, and when the enemy stuck their head up, you shot them.
The M1 Garand is the father of all U.S. Army and U.S. Ranger semi-automatic rifles. The M14 carried on the legacy, and now the M16 dynasty forms the backbone of both the Rangers and U.S. Army. But sometimes a rifle alone just isn't enough. The Ranger always has to balance firepower with what they can carry when things get hot. One firearm that trod a fine line between man portability and high lethality was the legendary BAR.
Primary application of the BAR is as an individual weapon. It is light enough that a single soldier can carry it and employ it against the enemy.
Crucially, the BAR operator didn't have to carry tons of special heavy ammunition. The Browning automatic rifle laid down suppressive fire in the same .30-06 caliber as the Garand.
An individual would carry a number of these magazines on his belt, loading them with the same ammunition as used in the rest of the squad's weapons.
The M249 saw is the legacy of the BAR. The belt-fed 249 fires the same 5.56 rounds as the M16 and M4 carbine, but in full machine gun mode, 750 rounds a minute. The Rangers rely on rapid firepower, but sometimes they need heavy ballistics to blitz the bad guys.
It's good to be able to reach out and touch those who are causing you problems.
They are a rapid reaction assault force. Wheels up and fully loaded in 18 hours. They can be on your doorstep before you know it. Knock, knock. It's the U.S. Army Rangers.
They're the first ones there. They arrive by land, sea, and air.
Ranger airborne units operating behind enemy lines need portable punch. Vehicle-mounted firepower and armor make them vulnerable to counterattack. Welcome to the world of shoulder-mounted fire. During World War II, a new generation of infantry anti-armor weapons evened up the fight against tanks. The American bazooka and classic German Panzerfaust were first. But improvements in tank armor technology meant that a new breed of heavier-hitting shoulder-mounted firepower had to be developed. The bazooka was no longer enough. The Carl Gustaf 84mm was developed to take its place. Designed in Sweden in 1948, it is so good at its job that it remains a Ranger favorite today. In fact, the Rangers renamed it.
While Rangers try to stay on the cutting edge of technology for their weapons, sometimes they find some that they don't want to change, such as the RAAWS, or RAWS. It's the Ranger Anti-Armor Weapon. It's nothing but a Carl Gustaf 84mm anti-tank projector.
Like all Ranger weapons, the Carl Gustaf combines compact size with lethal hitting power. A lightweight 19 pounds, It can kick out 6 high-explosive rounds a minute.
It was a weapon that you could take along in an airborne unit. You had to be able to have as much power as possible in as light a package as possible. It could be used against armor or light armor, or it could be used in a fixed position. Any place like that where, you know, small arms fire just simply wasn't enough to make the enemy move.
Rangers like weapons that can perform multiple functions. The more versatile a weapon system, the less other kit they have to carry on their missions. The Carl Gustav is no different.
Take down walls, doorways, shock effect to provide smoke and illumination as needed.
It fired an anti-personnel round. When that thing burst from the muzzle, it would lay some people down, that's for sure.
In the quest for more portable firepower, the Rangers end up getting their hands on more cutting-edge weaponry than regular units. The story of the M203 grenade launcher is typical.
They have been allowed to purchase special weapons. They've got some of the high-tech gear, which is not used by the regular United States Army, say, for a few more years. They are the crash test dummies.
To understand the M203, you have to go back to a Vietnam classic, the M79 grenade launcher. Designed by the Springfield Armory and adopted in 1960, it was nicknamed the platoon leader's artillery. Little more than an overgrown shotgun, its 40mm grenade gave a unit a whole bunch of punch.
It's a good anti-personnel weapon. It's a good way to reach the enemy by going over to him. It's good to be able to reach out and touch those who are causing you problems to push them back.
But the bulkiness of the M79 meant that it wasn't a Ranger Classic. It was too big for the operator to carry a rifle. The development of the next generation of grenade launcher provided a better solution. The M79 made way for the M203.
I took the 40mm grenade launcher and put it underneath the barrel of an M16 rifle.
Once again, troops on actual missions tested it.
We got XM203s that had grenade launch capability. They were part of a field test. 2 guys picked up on those. They were about to fight over them, so we gave both of them, and they loved it.
The M203 grenade launcher was slung under the M16 battle rifle. The operator was no longer a single-use specialist. He carried a rifle like the rest of his squad.
Well, the 203 itself was actually pretty effective. It used a 40mm grenade that could be high explosive. You could load it with a flare. You could load it with buckshot. There's just a lot of different rounds that were made for it.
The 203 is versatile enough to fit under a whole variety of assault rifles.
The newest version tends to be mounted on the M4 carbine. The 40mm grenade launcher adds only a few pounds to the overall weight of the weapon. It has a leaf sight system that can be used very quickly out to about 250 yards. It has a quadrant sight, which is a much finer sight and can allow the weapon to go to a maximum range of 400 yards, which is about as far as the 40mm low-velocity grenade will go. Take the weapon off safe, press the unlocking latch with your thumb, take a round, thumb it into the breech, shut it down, you're all set to fire.
Gotcha! These weapons have been in use since 1969 in the United States Army. Many other armed forces around the world have adopted them, even to go under AK-47s. And they're still in use today.
The M16 battle rifle with the M203 grenade launcher. 2 weapons in one. Ranger heaven. But all this high-tech firepower is now available to regular U.S. Army units. It's something else that makes the Rangers the toughest and best unit in the U.S. Army. That something is their training.
I gotta get lethal.
Rangers have all the best toys. Rockets, rifles, machine guns, and grenades. But ultimately, the greatest weapon in the Ranger arsenal is the Ranger himself. A never-say-die spirit and a punishing training regime make them the most feared warriors on the modern battlefield.
Ranger School is hard because it needs to create men who are made of steel, who will go farther and faster and fight harder than anyone else.
The U.S. Army Rangers were forged in the fire of World War II. William O. Darby trained up the first units in Britain ahead of the Allied assault on North Africa and Europe. Roger Nabergold joined the 2nd Ranger Battalion in 1942.
And it's been pretty good material. I've had it since 1945.
He remembers the moment that he lined up as a volunteer to join this elite unit of hard men.
So I walk in, and there's the meanest looking major I've ever seen in my life. And he said, Nabergold, he said, we don't trust anyone in the Rangers. Put your hands on the table. So I put my hands on the table. He pulled out a knife and drove it right in between my hands. I was petrified, but I never lost eye contact. But then he said, you're in.
Training from the outset was brutal. The military was building a force fit to fight in the lair of the enemy.
A little dirty out there, but when teacher has a couple of machine gunners throwing real slugs an inch or two above your tail, mud isn't such bad company.
Ranger training equipped them for the bloody battle for Europe. The standard was set.
The Rangers were probably the best trained soldiers of the war. We could fight all day and all night. The Germans at the end of the war were really scared to death of us.
Rangers were trained to kill by whatever means necessary. Hand-to-hand combat was part of training from the start. Every part of the Ranger was an instrument of war.
We learned how to kill people. If an individual came at you with a knife, you had to be aggressive and you had to be able to take knives away from people and then kill them, sometimes with their own knives.
Hand-to-hand fighting remains a key part of any elite infantry training. Grandmaster Tony Mayo is the master of multiple combat styles and a martial arts Hall of Famer. Here, he's training with Green Beret, Jose Pinzon.
I gotta get lethal. When you're dealing with a hand-to-hand combat scenario freeze, what you want to understand is, what can I use that is going to render the body useless?
Grandmaster Mayo is an expert in the principles of effective fighting based on combat jiu-jitsu and other martial arts.
In most traditional martial arts, they tell you your fists, your elbows, your knees, your feet, and those are obvious. But for example, if I'm approached and I'm held, let's say his hand is here, he's committed himself. That means he's availed himself. What if I'm out of range to punch? If he pushes me? What I just did there was hyperextended his elbow by using my deltoid, my shoulder. You see, I don't have to take off and use the typical traditional strike. I'm using a conventional way. Bang, I hit, he's going to respond by knee-jerk pulling that arm back. And then I'm coming right in. I can use my chest to inflict pain. When that arm goes back, see, now I'm in mode of operation. Every aspect of my body is an instrument, is a tool. I need to know how to use them.
Ranger training was formalized in September 1950. Ranger School was established at Fort Benning, Georgia. It has remained part of the Ranger family tree ever since. The template was the ferocious training regime of William O. Darby and the British Commandos. But the school's founders looked further back to what made the Rangers uniquely American, Major Robert Rogers.
His standing orders, which he wrote, I believe, in 1759, were the primary thing that were used to inspire Ranger students when I went to Ranger School, because it's a timeless list of priorities for Ranger special operations types of soldiers.
The key to the Ranger standing orders is their simplicity. The 19 rules are still drilled into the DNA of all elite units.
There were things that the frontiersmen could understand about tactics, about surveillance, about patrolling, about moving without being seen, and of course how to ambush.
Every Ranger memorizes these basic rules of ranging.
Never use the same route twice. If you think you're being tracked, move off, go around, and lay an ambush on those that are tracking you.
It was a great standard setter for them back at that time to be able to maintain a semblance of order when they're moving through the woods.
This combination of ancient principles and a brutal physical regime make the Ranger the best and toughest light infantry weapon in the world.
Ranger School is hard because it needs to create hard men. It needs to create men who are made of steel, who will go farther and faster and fight harder than anyone else.
The wannabe Rangers train 20 hours a day, often with 80-pound packs.
Oh, you almost got it.
Students sometimes lose 30 to 40 pounds during the training.
Ranger School starts out here at Fort Benning. You've got a couple of weeks basically of trying to see who is really interested in being there. And this is one of those situations where Ranger School really plays with your head. If you're going to quit, that's probably where you're going to do it.
But it's not over yet. Ranger School continues with mountain training in Georgia, then swamp training at Elgin Air Force Base in Florida.
By the time you get to Florida, your body is so worn out. We had a 12-day patrol, straight. This is something I really want to do.
Rangers can wash out at any time, either by giving up or failing a stage. 50% don't make the grade. At the end of the 60 days of pure hell, the Rangers received their tab at a ceremony back at Fort Benning.
Of all the military schools I was ever at, Ranger School probably was the one that I was the most proud of completing.
The day that I graduated Ranger School is one of the greatest days of my life. The black and gold Ranger tab, they take a pen and they pin it to your uniform. And at that moment, there's a feeling that I can't even describe to you, to step into that heritage and be part of something that is so long and will continue on. It was a great feeling, and I'll never forget it.
For Rangers with a thirst for more pain, there is the annual Best Ranger competition. Held over a merciless 2 days, teams of 2 Rangers slug it out to be recognized as the best of the best.
Both individuals work as a team. They have to complete it as a team. If one man falls out, then that team is out of the competition.
They put you through climbing, swimming, jumping, running, you name it. The first night after a full days of events is the road march. And it's anywhere from 20 miles to 26 miles. The rucksacks weigh anywhere from 60 to 70 pounds. That's where they lose the majority of their teams during the road march.
Best Ranger competition is as grueling as it gets. It defines what the Rangers are all about. 20 years after passing Ranger School, Doug Greenway still got what it takes. This year, he proved it with his new Ranger buddy, his son.
This year specifically, I went through with my son. See this guy grow up and to be that type of individual. I mean, there's nothing better. And then I asked him, I said, Brandon, what do you think about us doing a Ranger competition together before I get out? And it was never hesitation in his mind to be able to execute that with me.
Ranger! Of course, I wanted to say no, you know, because I just got done with Ranger school. You know, I'm tired, you know, I don't want to go to bed and stuff like that. But I told him I would, and I meant it, you know. The bigger the challenge, the better.
Special event in the Greenway life.
It was good to have him there because the bond between me and my father is, you know, huge, and we just got to share it and make it even bigger. You know, very big moment in my life.
Ranger School and the traditions that it represents is what separates the best from the rest. The school produces men who can lead a small team into the face of the enemy and overcome overwhelming odds.
The individual ranger can do more with his hands and his weapons than any other soldier in the world. Wherever he goes, the American Ranger will be known as the best soldier in the world.
The Rangers' training and toughness make them the enforcers of U.S. military might. Awesomely fit, armed to the teeth, and brilliantly led, they really are the men for any mission. Drawn together, the branches on their family tree reflect their unique genesis. 18th century ambush tactics, high-tech weaponry, and the best leadership training come together to form the toughest light infantry unit in the world.